Holy moly, you are in for a treat today. My guest today is my mentor, my coach. He's my spiritual guide. He's my mentee, my coach E. He's my best friend in the whole world. And the guy who I've learned so much about being a man of integrity, of being a spiritual man, of being a strong man, of having fun, of being irreverent, that spirituality is just hilarious. Everything that I've done with my next guest over the last 6, 7, 8 years has transformed every relationship in my life. And I'm so moved and thrilled and just kind of happy to have him on the show today. You will know him as Tony Bonnici, the founder of Zen Men and the creator of the Dojo Integrated Leadership. He's the author of a new book, and the book's called The Dojo, The Ancient Wisdom of Integrative Leadership for the Modern Entrepreneur. Tony was raised in a Buddhist temple. He trained as a junior Olympian in judo. He was diagnosed with dyslexia, which is going to be an interesting conversation about the fact that he wrote a book with dyslexia. He says over 30 years as an entrepreneur, he's learned to combine ancient wisdom, Zen teaching, his athleticism, his leadership in this blend of entrepreneurship to generate millions in revenue. And for the past 20 years, he's been teaching this method to entrepreneurs around the world, including me. Tony, thanks for being on the show.
Oh, I'm super excited to be here and as honored. Thank you for the intro. And I just feel blessed to be sharing my message, and to do it with you is extra special. So
So
thank you
tell
for
me, tell me
having me,
about the
Mark.
badass decision to write a book with dyslexia. Like, like that one of, you've been teaching, you speak, you do all these things, in person, on video, live, and all that stuff. But, sitting down and writing a book for you had to be a labor of love. Why'd you write this book?
I don't know if it's necessarily a labor of love to put that term on it, but definitely, I'm a guy that looks for things that are challenging and doesn't seem right for somebody to do or me to do. And so, when it came up in my mastermind about writing a book, the first thing in my head was hell no, and all the stories went off and all the alarms went off. And for me, that's like a sign right there that it's time, that that's an area that I could really go into and learn something about myself. So, labor of love came as the book developed, but definitely to challenge myself, as the story goes, that I'm a dyslexic and ADD and OCD, and that I'm not a writer, and I can't do that. And so that challenge in itself was like stepping up to something that my story said I couldn't do. So that's what brought that on to write the book.
That's something that, as long as you and I have known each other, has inspired me because, and we'll talk about it a little bit later, the fact that fear and resistance and obstacles and mindsets don't stop you from doing the impossible and the improbable. But right now, let's just go into the book. So the
Okay.
book, you kind of take all this ancient wisdom, you take all the disciplines that you have done in your life, which is, from Zen Buddhism to being a badass athlete to running businesses. And you've taken that whole thing and you've alchemized it into your own thing. And you separated the book into four pillars. Tell me what the four pillars are.
Yeah, so in the dojo, the four pillars are the monk, the sage, the samurai, and the sensei. And if I start backwards from the sensei, that the sensei is that place where my leadership is at its best, and I'm communicating it and teaching it to others. So that pillar is really about taking what you learn from pillars and bringing it out into the world and sharing your message of what it's like to be a sensei, a teacher out in the world. And so the sensei is the optimum place that we're working on getting to and refining that skill. And by going through the other three pillars, the monk, the sage, and the samurai, it hones in that way that you are a sensei, and how do you show up to your relationships, your body, your work, and your legacy work. So it's optimally we're going to the sensei. And when we start out in the monk is the place where we really look at that take a hard look at your life and what is ground zero right now for you and where is it at. Let's get reality check first, and that's where the monk takes that inward look. It's not about outward, and sees where ground zero is.
So
And that's that first pillar.
it's a self-reflection.
Yeah, self-reflection. Yeah, definitely a great way to put that. And then the sage comes on and says, "Well, what from that place of ground zero, what do I want to create? What is the vision for myself when I sit still and I listen deeply to myself? Where do I want to go and what do I want to create?" And so the sage really gets an idea of what a vision is for the person or myself.
Great. I don't want to be the monk. I don't want to be the sage. I want to be the samurai. Like
Yeah.
now it's time for action, right?
Yeah, yeah. So when the monk and the sage are in alignment, when you know where ground zero is, you know what that vision is, then the samurai is in action, and it's that warrior of moving forward from really having a clear vision and knowing exactly where you're at. The action starts to show the pathway all by itself by having those two things very clear in your life. So then the samurai starts to take those actions and create that reality of what that vision looks like.
What a great way. What a great way of explaining it. It's very archetypal to me. You know, just it just
Yeah.
really kind of resonates. I think different cultures would use different archetypes to explain the different parts of ourselves, the different energies. So
Mm,
then, you know, what I love about the book, and what I love about, you know, what everything that I've learned from you is that, you know, you started out kind of a driven entrepreneur, right?
hmm.
Like
Still
you weren't
am.
thinking about being integrated and, you know,
Oh
are my
no.
relationships good and how is my well-being, you know, because you talk about being a rebellious teenager and kind of putting your Zen Buddhism aside a little bit and really going headlong into business. So talk
Hmm.
about moving from, you know, tell me what it was like for you as an entrepreneur at first.
Yeah, well, as an entrepreneur, going into the real world and wanting to prove myself as an entrepreneur and a businessman, it started out being driven by what other people would judge or say about me. Of you can't do that, you can't start your own business, you know, you can't have over 10 employees, that kind of thing. And it would be a fuck you of saying, you want to bet I can totally do it. And in my 20s, I was just driven to go do it and put that kind of energy into it and block out everything else in my world. So it was really a singular focused energy, and can sometimes, you know, leave a wake of destruction in not being conscious of my surroundings or how I'm taking care of myself.
So you built a bunch of businesses to, you know, multi-million dollars in sales and things like that. So you became the success. You defied, you know, logic and did what, you know, did those things. What was the cost of not being integrated, of not all the things you teach now back then? What was that cost?
Yeah, well, the biggest one for me is when I first got married, I was still in that really driven space. And so, first of all, not being a present husband or partner uh, at all, so engulfed by the companies and making money, that it was more um, having somebody there to take care of needs that I didn't really want to take care of. And so that's how that started out, and it feels yucky. And then that came out into then having my first child and still doing business the same way, and really not being there as a dad for my kids, my first child. And then when my second child comes, that was the wake up call to change things and do things differently. So my son and my wife are the ones that took that toll of that at the most extent.
Yeah, in the book, you bring it home. You talk about how your wife is in labor and you're still trying to make calls to bring in money for payroll. And you
Yeah.
know, in between her screams and going back and forth and thinking you could do both things. You know, that tell what was that like for, you know, how did that change you?
Yeah, well, that was a very I don't like talking about that this time in my life now that I reflect back at it. And I think it's so important that you know, people and entrepreneurs hear about that, the truth of, you know, here I'm wife goes into labor and I'm down on payroll. It's 2008. Things aren't clicking like they had been for the last 5 to 10 years. And so I was the guy to make sure those accounts payable were taken care of. And so she goes into labor, and my office is right next door to our master bedroom. So I went back to singular focus and said, okay, let's get her settled and taken care of, and then I can go back in, and I could do both simultaneously. I could multitask, and uh, that's a time that I'll never get back, to be with Amber for that part of the birth, and was making payroll worth it to me as I look back? No, not at all. And I don't want an entrepreneur or other entrepreneurs to go through that kind of experience where you lose these precious times in your life that you can never get back. And so, it took me getting into a water or birth tub to deliver Bodhi, my second child. And when he came out, it was like everything was different. Everything was going to change. I felt all these emotions flood through my body that I hadn't experienced, that I blocked off. And I said, there's going to be a different way to do this, and it's going to start now. And so that the water birth was, that change for me to really, really take a dive into my own work and create a different path.
But you didn't come out of that pool with more than a shift. Like you didn't come out with this framework and how to live life and how to be an entrepreneur, like roadmap already, mapped out. You came out with something's got to give, something's got to be different. And what you've
Yeah.
taught me and what you talk about in the book is these quadrants of work and legacy. That's one, section of your life that you really do need to pay attention to, right? Then there's the
Hmm.
physical, your physical well-being, and your
Yes.
mental health. Then there's your relationships, and then your spiritual well-being. So that's
Hmm.
been formed over the decades since you came out of the pool with your sons and your wife. What's the
Yes.
evolution like? How did you realize that, and start to address each one of these things? Because I'm sure people who are listening, they're like, holy shit, that's me. I'm taking, I'm going to kill the woolly mammoth. I'm taking care of my family as best I can. And they know they're
Right.
falling short in these other parts of their lives. How did you
Yeah.
start to bring that in?
Well, that's good, because I really narrowed it down to a really small bite-sized chunk. The one for me that really took a back seat when I was in this space was being working on a spiritual practice or meditating, and growing up in Zen temple and being a meditator. It was like that all went away. So bringing back the smallest little baby step, the 1 minute a day meditation for myself, that I could really start to make that shift in that quadrant, started to open the door for the other quadrants of my relationship, taking more time for my family than I probably ever did as an entrepreneur, and really focus on being present in that. And even if it's that 10 minutes when I first get home, or kissing the kids goodbye before I go to work, like taking those little baby steps to make those changes. Going for a walk for myself was a big deal, because I'd want to get back into the gym and do an amazing job and perform for everybody. And it was like, I just need to just start small, and then slowly made my way into, my physical body. I can run a half marathon, or I can go swim a mile in the open ocean, or things like that, to expand into that as time went on. And that's where the real gold lies for me, and that I see with my clients, is in when they start to own the same vision or challenge for themselves in their relationship, spiritual practice, or their body. Their work and legacy takes on a whole new life and meaning that has never been, I never experienced it so fulfilling as I have. Being an entrepreneur and being in business for a long time, it gets kind of rote or like stale. And so by bringing in, challenging myself physically to run a half marathon when I'm not a runner, or make sure I get that date night once a week with Amber, and take the boys out once a week, that those all those things were a challenge for me, that brought spark back to me as an entrepreneur, and a life partner, a dad, my body, and actually having a practice of spirituality.
Mm. I'm writing right now in my new book, The Rising Leader Handbook. I'm writing the chapter on, a contemplation practice and how
Mm.
essential it is to your success, how it, how it, just changes every other piece of your life. And what you just said to me was that was the germination of you
Mhm.
addressing your relationship, of you addressing your physical health and all those things. But it started with 1 minute sitting on the cushion. So,
Yes.
so most of us talk about having some kind of a spiritual practice and mindfulness in business and that kind of stuff, right? And you're the one, I remember, your dad's book, Boundless Intimacy. I remember when you and I were early in our friendship, and I was saying I wanted to go deeper into my spirituality. You said, "Are you sure?" And I said,
Mm.
"No, I absolutely want to go into my spirituality." You said, "Okay, well, if you're committed," and then you send me this book that's about the size of a coffee table, uh,
Right.
and I read it, and I read it
Mm.
several times, and I did my sitting, as you taught me, and lo and behold, the cliche is true, right? Every area of my life started to grow, my career, my relationships, my health,
Mm.
everything from that contemplation practice. So when you talk about it, you talk about it not only from a guy who grew up
Mhm.
steeped in that, right? It was necessary for you to go through that midlife crisis kind of thing when your kids were born of how do I want to
Yeah.
live the next years.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. It was some of the most, formative in my younger years, and then bringing it back after it went away totally, and how fast it can go away, and the importance of beginning again, and bring it down to 1 minute a day. You have a spiritual practice. I don't care how you sit, what you look like, as long as you're committed to that 1 minute a day. That's where it began for me again, and then I can elongate it to the 20 minutes and start that practice of having something that has a substantial amount of time, whether it's prayer or sitting in stillness.
Nice. So there's three nuggets I want people to get because I get it from you every day, and
Okay.
I want people to get these three nuggets from you just by listening. The first is you walking through fear. You have taught me
Mm.
so much about being, the whole thing, be scared and do it anyway.
Hmm.
You taught me how to be with fear and move through it anyway. Can you talk about your relationship with fear and actually taking action?
Yeah. Fear to me is one of the best tools I can have as an internal mechanism on things that will have me grow or challenge myself. And so by looking for things that create fear in my body and saying, actually, things that create fear are what I'm going to go towards, and to start to develop the relationship of seeing areas that you really are scared of and go, oh, I'm going to go explore that more. Like one area for me right now in real time of that is I'm not a typer. And
Mm.
so it brings up fear for me to type because I have broken fingers that lock up and stuff on me. Things I'm dyslexic. I make up all the stories. So I say, okay, that brings up fear. I'm gonna learn how to type. And my mind the whole time is saying, no, don't do that. Right? Like, why do you even need to do that? You can use voice to text. It has
I've
all the
made it to
reasons.
50 something years old, not typing all these years. Why start now?
Exactly, exactly. And when that alarm goes off in my head, I go, that's what I'm going to focus on. So whether it's typing, whether it's going on a 5K walk or walking daily, that I look for things that create fear in my thinking and in my body, and then I go, oh, I'm going to do that. And it's a lot.
Why does walking daily scare you?
Walking daily is that taking time for myself and that I have value, and so my beliefs in that are like don't go do that. So I'd say maybe not as much fear, but more that the stories I tell myself
Mhm.
is that it's not okay for me to go and do that. I'm too busy, that kind of
Well,
thing.
to explain to everybody, Tony's a giver, right? Tony spends his life serving, giving,
Mm.
taking care of other people, making sure they get what they need, whether it's a phone call or show up or something like that. So taking time for yourself would be fearful because are you, shirking your responsibilities to the world that you tend to serve?
Yeah,
My
yeah.
favorite story about you and fear is that you live in Hawaii, surrounded by water, And you're
Hmm.
afraid of sharks.
Yes, I'm terrified of sharks. I grew up with orca and jaws, and
Right?
that having living around water, it was like, oh, this is going to be fun to be around water all the time. And then my boys start to get old enough where they start going in the water, and I find myself on shore and up to my ankles in water. And that journey of starting saying, okay, I'm going to really work on the fear around sharks and water has been the last 7 or 15 years, and it's still the big one for me of doing that. And like right now, my kid that's 17, Sage, can dive 120 feet on one breath, and I go
So
out with him as safety.
that's the free diving that you, Bodhi, and Sage do.
Yes, yes, exactly, exactly. So me saying, "Oh, I'm going to go out and dive with them," activates all the fear in my body down to my core of when I was a little boy walking out of the orca movie. And so,
Most people don't
I'm,
remember that movie. I love that movie. That
oh
was
my,
such a. Most people remember Jaws, but they don't remember the rival, the orca that chomps Jaws in the beginning of the movie.
right. Yeah, yeah. And so I get in the water, I free dive, I spearfish. I'm, working on swimming constantly out in the open ocean. And that fear is real, and I can go right into panic. And so I approach that and constantly work on getting in the water and that relationship with my fear with that. And that accentuates all the other areas of my life. It really, I mean, to bring, I just got out of the water, and I'm exhilarated feeling that energy, and then bring it to this call, man, it's felt, it's palatable. My clients get it, my relationships get it, I get it from that
Right.
sense of satisfaction in accomplishing something.
Yeah, it was a cool thing that you and I did when we brought that group of people for the Limitless Success Adventure, and we had them swimming
Oh.
at night with manta rays, and we were diving at night. I was terrified, right? But I'm like,
Yeah.
damn, if I'm not getting in the water, if you're getting in the water, and it was one of the most exhilarating things of my life. Absolutely. So the second
Yeah.
nugget
Hmm.
is your relationship with resistance, right? We all know that internal resistance, it's kind of fear, but it's not, it doesn't show up as fear. And we kind of don't want to, we don't ever get to something that we say is important. How do you work with resistance?
So resistance to me is a relationship, and I call it a relationship more than anything else that will come up. You can feel it as, oh, I'm not sure if I want to do this, or feel the resistance to it. Well, if I have a relationship with it, that I can expand and grow and adapt to my resistance. And so, if we take the idea of meditating 1 minute a day, and man, every time I get up, my alarm goes off, and my resistance to not getting out of bed and sitting on a chair and breathing for 1 minute is so strong, I sleep through my alarm every single morning, and it hasn't happened. I never even did it. I talked to Tony, I talked to Mark, and it doesn't happen. So we say, okay, how's your relationship with that? Can we begin again? Can we start again? Not paying attention to what time your alarm goes off, but getting up and sitting on the chair no matter what, and going back at it like it was a beginning or fresh start over and over and over again, and not coming at it with beating myself up or I didn't do good enough, shaming myself. It's like, hey, that didn't work this week. Are you willing to start and begin again and really dive dive into that resistance? So
Yeah.
beginning again, having a relationship.
Yeah, so it's so hard, and that's where accountability buddies, that's where coaches, that's where a peer group all help in moving through that kind of thing.
Yeah,
So
I mean, to me, it's the most important and essential to have a network and a team of people that support you, especially if you're going through anything you feel fear or resistance for, because the mind will switch you back to your old way faster than you can even blink.
Right. You and I have a mastermind that we speak, 2 o'clock every Friday. Most people can't get in touch with us because we're on our call. It's not
That's
something we
right.
set up like you have to be there. There's rules to this whole thing and all that stuff. And we're all really, really busy. And we show up every Friday at 2 o'clock and we help each other with our businesses, with our lives, with our love lives, with our, everything that we're doing. And it's just been
Hmm.
so invaluable, right? To have friends who know you inside and out and that unshakable support. I don't know, how anybody does it without that.
Yeah, I mean, talk about unshakable support. I've wanted to burn this or throw it out the door.
He's holding up the book for those who are listening.
Oh, yes, a lot of times. The book is something that I've come up against my resistance, my fear around that, and to have my tribe and team that really has my back and won't let that flame go or let resistance be the thing that's going to stop me. Boy, it's been priceless to have that kind of support. So, going into any endeavor that you do have somebody or a team that can really bring that on to have you move through your resistance and not let it go or it go by the wayside.
Okay, my number three nugget is something that you taught me about spirituality that I never understood. When I think about spiritual people, when I think about people who meditate and mindful and all that, I think about these people who are even keeled, right? No emotion, just always right in every situation and all things. And when I
Mm,
met you, when you were sad, you cried. When you were mad, you raged. When you were, like just when you recounted the story of Amber giving birth to Bodhi, and you could hear the crack in your voice, that emotion.
hmm
And what you taught me was the more present I am, the more quote unquote spiritual and present and here in relationship with life I am, the more my emotions will be present. Now, the the piece that goes even further than that is when these emotions come up and you feel emotions so strong, I can be standing next to you and feel the heat of anger from you, right?
hmm
Now, the other piece to that is even though these relationships, these emotions come up and you feel them so hard, you're able to actually choose your behaviors, you choose your actions, even with these strong emotions.
hmm
How do you experience that?
Well, I'll say, the first 20 years of being an entrepreneur is that I wanted to do the opposite of that. And I really suppressed and held down my emotion. I was a master at it. I could really, really shut it off. And if I made up a story about being Zen or spiritual, it was, you show no emotion. Everything's always good. It's like there's this whole persona of what spirituality looks like. And when I would see my dad give talks or speeches, that I could see that when he would be speaking, he would actually be experiencing the emotion while he's talking, and it was uncomfortable a lot of times for me to actually sit and witness him
Mm,
experiencing emotion. And so my initial response was, don't do that. It makes people feel uncomfortable. And what I've learned through my coaching and men's work, that really a leader or a complete entrepreneur actually allows their body to feel all their emotions, not suppress them, hide them, or deny them, and really let that be a part of the human experience of what it's like to lead and feel sadness or feel rage or anger, and communicate it in a way that is either clean or that I'm willing to clean it up if it doesn't come out that way. And man, I practice like for the last at least 15 years of what it's like to let my emotions be fluid and not hide them at all in any situation. And it's been one of the most vibrant pieces to me as in my 50s and as an entrepreneur. I mean, I didn't really get what it meant to laugh for a long time. And if I say now, within the last year, laughter has been more of a belly laugh and an experience for me than I've experienced in a long time, to let that joy flow through me. And one of the things that they say is like, if if there's five core emotions, mad, sad, glad, fear, shame, if you suppress any of those, you're suppressing all of them. So if you suppress anger at all, you're suppressing joy too, right? You're suppressing sadness. If you suppress sadness, you're suppressing joy. So if you let them all out and you let them all be present in your life and what they are, boy, you get to experience the joy, like these belly laughs that I've been having conversations and just laughing. Oh my gosh, it feels so good. It's a practice to do it. And if you can notice the emotion that is happening in your body and actually say, wow, I'm feeling sad, or man, I'm mad, like you can acknowledge it, that to me is the start of it. It's not about crying, it's not about showing someone you're angry. Really recognizing that you're experiencing an emotion and start it off that way, it'll just keep blossoming in that, to where I can lead in front of hundreds of people and I can show my emotions fluidly. So it's definitely a practice, and one of the most fulfilling sides of leadership that I had no idea was even possible.
Yeah, and you taught me to to not be afraid of having those emotions. And now, no matter what emotion is going on through my body, I can still perform whatever needs to happen. If I can, I've interviewed people on this podcast where I started off just so nervous, and I can
Mm-hmm.
actually hold that and still be professional and show up in a way. I was talking to a client who, the reason that I was hired was because his anger was getting him into trouble. Right, he's a
Mm.
senior leader of this organization, and he was just uh, being messy with that anger and getting into trouble. So we actually dialed him back, and we got him meditating, we got him doing all kinds of things. And the CEO called me and said, "What did you do with him? Oh my God, he's completely different." And I'm like,
Right.
"I don't know. I'm a miracle worker, right? Great." But a few weeks later, he said to me, Mark, he says, I feel, I got my behavior is so much better and I'm getting lots of feedback. He says, but I feel so inauthentic. Like I feel
Mm.
so shut down and inauthentic. And it just, this doesn't feel sustainable.
Mm.
And we talked about it. And I'm like, yes, we move the pendulum, but the pendulum's got to go someplace in some sort of equilibrium. Your natural state is passionate. You get
Mm.
angry. You can't hide it from people. It's a powder keg. So we talked about how he can allow his anger to come up in a conversation, but how do
Mm-hmm.
you do it responsibly so that the anger
Yes,
doesn't land on the person in front of you? Right?
that's right.
You can be angry. You can even say, I'm angry,
Mm-hmm.
and keep it from touching the other person. And that's been a game changer where he can be authentic. If he's
Yes.
angry, he's angry. If he's happy, he's happy, and not be irresponsible with that anger, with that energy. And that's something that I learned from you. And the fact that you were able to codify all this intangible stuff into a book is brilliant. And I'm really
Mm.
impressed, Tony. It's amazing.
Thank you very much. It's been an honor, and that you got to be on this journey and coach, support, mentor, kick my ass through this process. Thank you.
But how does it feel to have, like, because you've probably been going for the past, for several years going, I don't know what I do. It's just kind of I show up and I do my thing and I don't know what I do. And people give me money to spend time with me. Yay. And they get
Yeah.
successful and all this stuff. And now you've codified it. Like now it's like, oh my God, I actually do a thing. It's there's a rhyme and a reason to the whole thing. Does it feel kind of like a birth of something cool?
Oh, I mean, to be able to articulate it for, the last 20 years of being a coach, that you got to sit down with me. How do I articulate it? How do I describe it? So, man, it's a huge piece for me to be able to codify it and have a methodology that I can succinctly explain and really give people a taste of who I am and what I do and how I do it. And so, the book is that it's a great resource for that, and made it specifically for that, because I'd have to sit down with somebody for 2 to 6 hours sometimes and really go through a process to let them experience what happens. And so this really puts it into reality that is tangible and digestible, you know.
the gift for me is that you've been there, you've done that, you bought the t-shirt, you've run your businesses, you did it, you did it wrong, quote unquote wrong, and you made all the mistakes, and you built this piece by piece for yourself before you ever taught it to anybody else. So
Yeah.
it's a reality based methodology. So I'm really impressed. Tony, how can people get in touch with you if they're looking for you?
Yeah, so TonyBonnici.com is probably the easiest way to go to my website, and there's a link there for my email address or um, phone number, but that'd be the easiest way.
And that's going to be all that you find there because Tony's a man of few words. So it's not going to, it's like, here's how you get in touch with Tony. So, I hope you will, because it's a magical experience. Thank you for being here, Tony. Thanks for sharing with me.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. I appreciate you. Aloha.
Aloha to everybody else. Your time and your attention is precious to me. I appreciate you. I love you. Have a great rest of the day.